Welcome, everybody, to Rivalry Week. Magic v. Bird. You know what's better than talking about Magic v. Bird? Is getting to learn about Magic v. Bird, because I get to sit back for a learning episode while Professor Adam educates me as well. This is something that I don't know a ton about, but I actually probably know more about it than I think, just because it was such a huge... It is a historic rivalry. The franchises themselves have a historic rivalry, and this was at a time when it was just them going at it every year in the finals, at least for an extended period of time. And that's just my cursory knowledge on it, is I know about those runs. There's a show about it. It's not centered completely around these guys' rivalry, but it's a large portion of this show is Showtime.
Mm-hmm.
You get this era that's the, what do they call it? The
Showtime era.
The Showtime era.
Showtime Lakers.
And there's no Showtime Lakers without the guys on the other side. And it was perfect, dude. East Coast, West Coast, flashy fucking Hollywood Lakers. And then it kind of seemed like it was like hardworking, like, this is fucking Boston. Is that kind of like, it's culture clash too in that?
There is, and I love the way that you describe it, because this is the exact same thing that we always joke about when you talk about a white football player and a black football player. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the gym rats against the
workhorses.
Yep. Uh-huh.
That man right there to my left needs no introduction. He's the Chuck to my Shaq. He's the Jackie to my Ed Monix. He's the Drake to my Toronto Raptors.
Oh,
Professor Adam.
Drake has no loyalty. I have plenty of loyalty.
The last time I actually followed basketball, Drake was extremely loyal.
Drake was a Raptors fan.
Yeah, Drake was a huge Raptors fan.
Well, I gotta say, I'm not a man of a ton of interests. Fairly niche interests. I mean, basketball is huge, but I don't know as far as like in history podcast form how deep people get into it. I hope that you guys enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy the shit out of it. I'm going to try to make it interesting to everybody instead of just people that enjoy sports, because there's so many stories here that kind of converge all into a tale of just one guy from French Lick, Indiana, and another guy who started life in Lansing, Michigan, that sort of changed a lot of different things. I'm going to call this loosely like a Forrest Gump of events that happened in Larry Bird and Magic Johnson's lives.
And I'm going to do my best to not interrupt too much, because I know that's a thing I do during these learning episodes, but I am going to have questions, but I'll try to do like a hand raise system maybe to let you know, and you can just say, yeah. And
Professor
if Adam
Chris,
says, yes, it's
historically
not
high.
me interrupting, my hand is raised. Okay, I'm going to do that for you guys. All right, just remember, guys, rate, review, subscribe. Those 5 stars are helping more than you guys could possibly know. It's getting us more eyes, and with that, we can do more for you guys as far as episodes and content. So please keep that up. And without further ado, we're getting into Magic versus Bird.
Well, we got to start with Magic. The younger of the two gentlemen, but Irvin Magic Johnson Jr., born August 14th, 1959 in Lansing, Michigan. He was one of 10 children. I believe he had 6 siblings and then 4 half-siblings. Irvin Sr. and Christine were his parents. Irvin Sr. was a hell of a worker. The guy... We're in Michigan. What's the big plants in Michigan?
Yeah, he's a worker. He has 10 kids.
Yeah, from that aspect too.
And what? Yeah. How does he have energy to actually work?
Irvin woke up early. Irvin took care of some trash. He did kind of some city work stuff. And then his second job, he would go punch in at, I believe it was the GM plant in Michigan, in Lansing. Irvin worked there for 30 years and received a perfect attendance, never missing one day of work in 30 years. That, to me, seems like a pretty...
Fuck.
Yeah, that's a base to really work from, especially working two jobs.
I do not know anyone that can make that claim.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Christine worked too. Having that amount of children, you're just always going to need money. They weren't the poorest people in the world, but they certainly weren't rich.
Yeah.
The other thing too is
10 kids.
if you have that many brothers and sisters, you don't get a whole lot of stuff that's not a hand-me-down, because if you get bought something new, that means that he has to buy 9 other new things. And Magic, listening to an interview about this, was so funny, because he's like, I came and I asked my dad for some money because I wanted something, and he told me that he was going to introduce me to 3 friends, and those 3 friends would be able to give me as much money as I wanted to, and I was so excited. And he walked me out to the shed and he introduced me to Mr. Lawnmower, Mr. Rake, and Mr. Shovel, and he said those are going to pay for anything that you want to do. And so Magic just kind of learned how to work. Along with a strong work ethic to get what he wanted in life. He just loved basketball. He grows up to be 6'9", which is a very large human being by any real aspect, but kind of the game that he ends up playing is something that a 6'9" guy just didn't ever really do. In junior high, which again, there's some sports things that I think Chris will kind of hem me in on. Just understand that if I kind of make reference to statistic, it's probably because it's a very hard thing to do. He once scored 48 points in a junior high basketball game. So junior high, early teens, he scored 48 points in one game.
And he's probably playing other kids that are good at basketball.
Yeah. And we're talking, if you score 60, 70 points in a junior high game, that's a lot of points. He put in 48 by himself.
Most high school basketball games don't get teams scoring 60 each.
Yeah. But Magic was just that good. Here's where we get into some of the Gumpian aspects of this. The high school that he planned to attend was called Sexton High School. It was a predominantly black high school. And the reason that I say that is because as Magic was going into high school, this is where we started talking about desegregating schools and actually busing kids from predominantly black schools into white schools for integration. Lansing wasn't exactly the most progressive place in the world when this happened. So, Magic wanting to go to Sexton High School, he ends up finding out, you're not going to be able to go there. We're going to bus you to a predominantly white school named Everett High School. There was a lot of problems with that, because back then people fought against integration, and he says that he can remember going to school those first few times on the buses, rocks being thrown at them, protests outside the school, violence when he actually got inside the school, not towards him, but he would see these race clashes. And he said that on one hand, he was really, really bummed that he didn't get to go to Sexton, because that's where he really wanted to go. But he said that he thinks that going to Everett High School actually made him a better person, because he was able to get outside of the bubble and the neighborhoods that he knew and actually experience more of life. I feel like that's a pretty cool thing. There's one thing that Magic has always had his entire life that I think is second to none. You've seen a Magic Johnson smile.
Yeah.
A Magic Johnson smile will light up a room. It's just absolutely incredible. The guy's just charismatic as all fuck. He'll charm the pants off of anybody.
Yeah.
And that's just the way that he is. So he ends up at Everett. He starts to play basketball, and he kind of starts to be an intermediary when he would see his teammates kind of have these race issues flare up. And he kind of held everybody together. And along with doing that, he actually earned the nickname Magic when he was 15 years old. He was a sophomore, and he did something as a sophomore at 15 in high school called a triple-double. Now, a triple-double is where you get 3 stats into double figures.
Yes, double digits in 3 separate stats. So what Magic had was, it was 36 points, 18 rebounds, and 16 assists. So in order to do that, to kind of break it down for people that don't really have basketball knowledge, to score the 36 points, most basketball players shoot around 50%, probably shooting, depending on how far away from the basket
Yeah.
you are. Further away, of course, lower percentage. So, and in a high school basketball game, at 15 years old, when you're playing 18-year-olds that are probably like a little bit more developed and mature than you and everything, he's essentially coming in. It's like a rookie coming in and just completely dominating the entire league.
Yeah, that's sort of a story.
That's what it is. It's being kind of a prodigy is basically what it is.
So he has this incredible game, and this sports writer, the fact that they have high school sports writers in newspapers back then, maybe it's just because it was more of a local thing, so there was a lot more focus on high schools. Maybe that's a little bit different than...
I think we sometimes, being from a smaller area, we miss out on the fact that in certain areas, high schools are so big for sports and things like that. It's like thinking about, of course, like think of a Texas high school for football. The paper is going to go ahead and cover that.
They got $1 million stadium.
Yep, you're going to get people that from the local paper trying to get quotes from players about what they thought of that opponent and stuff like that. So, but what's even cooler about this is the fact that a local sports writer like that gets to be the one that coined the nickname Magic that follows him throughout his entire career.
Yeah. And Magic kind of became an alter ego for Irvin. His senior season, he took Everett to a 27-1 record. They won a state championship. In that state championship game, he had 28 points and 16 rebounds, so he scored the ball at least 14 times and then grabbed the ball at least 16 times off of the hoop. He was actually a part of the inaugural McDonald's All-American High Schoolers. I did not realize that McDonald's All-Americans went back that far.
Yeah.
But the highest honor that you could get coming out of high school basketball.
It's so crazy that it's McDonald's that does that.
Yeah, dude. Well, they've had their hand in that for forever.
Would this be a better comparison? Because people that maybe don't have knowledge of like basketball lore and like history and stuff like that, Magic in high school was what would be akin to kind of like how LeBron James was in high school. It was just at a time when the option maybe wasn't there for a high schooler to go pro right out of high school. Maybe dialed down just a tiny little bit, right?
I would say these are only really time differences, and what I'm going to say now sounds just real too inside basketball, but Irvin went to a public high school and didn't have the kind of media following outside of his little sphere of influence. And I think this will actually kind of sum a little bit of this coming up, but he was that good. And LeBron went to St. Vincent St. Mary's, which was not necessarily a prep school, but it was a school where you could draw higher profile players to play on that basketball team with you. So it wasn't necessarily like all the guys that went to St. Vincent.
One is a school that is formed with the pool that you have.
Yep.
And one is formed by being able to recruit. Gotcha. Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, media just separated everything. Magic got offers from every major college powerhouse that was around. UCLA's, Kentucky's. Everybody wanted a piece of him. He says that he stayed at home and went to Michigan State, which is in East Lansing, because he couldn't leave his mom's food and his cooking.
Fuck yeah.
Just absolutely loved it. And he was like, I don't know. His ultimate hope to go to Michigan State wasn't to go to the NBA. His ultimate hope was to get a degree in communications and become a TV commentator for basketball. So his ultimate goal wasn't like, I'm going to play for this basketball team until I make it into the NBA. He was already planning for something outside of it, but he was just so good that it was undeniable where he was going to end up. Which, I mean, I think that was the difference also with him and LeBron, was he actually had like a plan B, whereas LeBron just knew once you get into the NBA, you're that good, you're going to make a first contract.
He knew before he had even graduated that that's where he was going. Whereas, okay.
Yeah, so that was, I think, where it was. But the guy was just an absolute stud as a freshman. He led them to a 25-5 record. They won the Big Ten title. And in the NCAA tournament back then, I believe it was only 32 teams at this point in time. Don't quote me on that, but I think it goes 32, and then it went 48, and then it grew from there. But they made it to the Elite Eight, which is the third to last round.
8-4 to 2-1. Yeah.
Yeah, of the
March Madness.
March Madness, and they lost to Kentucky. Kentucky will play a fun role coming up here in a second, but Kentucky would go on to win the national championship. They were absolutely incredible. They were very, very, very good.
And he's a freshman.
Yep, and that was just his freshman season.
Did he lead the team in stats and everything like that?
Yeah, he just controlled everything.
Okay.
There's a difference that we'll kind of talk about with Larry and Magic. I am a little bit more of a Larry guy, but I think Magic was better.
What position did Magic play?
Magic played point guard.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. So explain also kind of what set him apart so much is at that time, average height for a point guard that's where you're putting your shortest guy. He's supposed to be the guy that's dishing out assists and setting up plays and everything like that. He's the quick guy. He's your long range shooter. So are we thinking maybe like around like 6 foot, 6'2"?
I would probably say like 5'10" to maybe 6'2" would be,
especially in college around
Yep.
that time. 6'9" would essentially be not a post, but maybe like a post.
No, you're right around there. It would be like power forward center. So the two guys that play down low the most.
Okay.
Which, oh yeah, you don't know about their first championship in LA, do you?
No.
Oh, it's a hell of a story. Okay. We're going to switch gears, and we are going to head over to a place called West Baden Springs, Indiana, for Larry Joe Bird's birth on December 7th, 1956. So we're going to have to travel back in time a little bit for this. Joe was his father. Georgia was his mother. He was one of 6 kids. He had 4 brothers and 1 sister. And this is like South Indiana. South Indiana was a pretty big part of Klan culture. They were pretty active in Indiana. And
Not the Birds.
No, not the Birds,
Just
but
the
this
area.
is just where the Klan kind of was a hotbed. He ended up being raised in a place called French Lick, and they were like poor. Like the poorest that poor could pour. Larry and his brothers were kind of synonymous in the area for getting into a lot of fights. Larry would intentionally start shit with older kids that were around his brother's age so his brothers could fight him because he said he could go home and tell his dad that he got beat up by a kid around one of his brother's ages, and if his brothers didn't step in, he would get his brothers in trouble for not protecting him for
So
the
they
fights
had to
that he was
step in.
picking. Yeah.
Fucking Larry.
Joe was a construction worker. He was gone a lot. A very, very tough man. Georgia had to work 2 jobs, and so she's working 2 jobs. Joe's working out of town away on construction. Left the kids kind of to have a lot of alone time.
Latchkey kids.
Yeah. Joe, his father, actually served in World War II in the Korean War, and Joe suffered from some pretty heavy PTSD. He turned to the bottle a lot, but I don't know. This is kind of a weird one. These subjects are always odd because it sucks that he's a bad dad, but I kind of get it.
Humans are meant to go through that kind of
Yeah,
stuff, let alone
especially twice.
Yeah.
Twice is
You're extremely fortunate if you get out the first time like through a war like that without debilitating shit. But yeah, you're not beating the odds. No. Getting out of the second one.
No, and the fact that the bird kids had so much kind of time to themselves, in the documentary that is like top 5 documentaries for me, it's called Magic versus Bird, a courtship rivalry, something along those lines. It's on HBO. Larry talks about how his family was so poor that if he wanted anything, he had to work for it. So during his lunch break at school, he would actually work inside the school to earn money. And then after he got out of school, before he had to be home for dinner or anything like that, which could be literally fucking any time because his parents weren't there, he would actually go to the basketball courts in town. and at the basketball courts in town were all of the servers and waiters and bellhops at hotels and everything. That's where they would meet.
Yeah.
Predominantly at that time, those were all black people. And so this guy who was dubbed the Hick from French Lick learned to play basketball and was accepted by these predominantly black people that were in town, and they were able to accept him in an area where racism was rampant. And I'm kind of laying this groundwork a little bit thick. You'll see later on. But Larry learned how to play basketball from somebody else, from not a white person.
Mm-hmm.
And
someone more athletically inclined.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, playing against guys that are more athletic than you, you have to be crafty. You have to be able to figure shit out. And that's totally how Larry's game was just crafted. His parents ended up divorcing while he was in high school in 1974. Bird played his high school ball at Springs Valley High School as a senior. This is where the numbers get nuts. As a senior, he averaged 31 points, 21 rebounds, and 4 assists. So 21 rebounds in a game. He's catching 21.
Averaging over the season.
Yes.
Not having any off nights.
He's catching that many boards a game, that many shots missed. He's scoring 31 points a game. He's a monster.
How tall was he?
6'9".
Okay.
So, again, another tall guy.
Was he playing his, unlike Ware, and we kind of glossed over it, but so essentially Magic being at the point guard position, someone that big, the reason that they were never really in that position is because they were too slow. But he essentially was that size and had the dexterity and the speed of a smaller guy. So he could actually be dishing the ball off and everything, setting up plays, but at the same time, moving to a down low position to be able to also dominate and get shots off down there.
Yeah.
He could literally do everything.
And not to mention, when you're guarding somebody, you can guard a 6'9" center just as easily.
And be much more athletic to get around him.
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, so Larry... 6'9", does he play kind of in a more traditional position?
He's more of a small forward.
Okay.
Kind of off of the ball, so not necessarily always a ball handler. But at the same time, his passing is sublime. He knows how to get guys the ball. He has kind of that intuition to know where guys are. And that's where I think, hands down, Magic, by far and away, the more athletic player. I think he could handle a ball a lot better, which... coming out of passes, dribbling, anything like that's always going to be very, very important. But Larry could shoot. Larry could shoot the lights out. We'll talk about some Larry stories from the NBA that it's tough to explain how you can be that much better in a professional league than just everybody else around you. But after Larry ends up getting done with high school, he gets recruited to a couple different places. Kentucky, that same Elite Eight team that had beat the Spartans in Magic's freshman season, comes calling for Bird. Bird goes down, he sees the campus, kind of falls in love with the campus, thinks that he could definitely play there. He took his mom and dad there to get their input on it. They said, we think that this would be great for you. They go back to Indiana. His coach says, Kentucky's no longer interested in you. They're going to pull their offer. So, we run into a little situation where Bird is also recruited by the University in Indiana. And do you know who was the coach that recruited him?
I know one University of Indiana coach, and it's the chair thrower himself.
Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight recruited Larry Bird to play at Indiana.
Was his coach telling the truth?
About the poll from Kentucky?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Bird doesn't...
the way you said it and the way you're looking at me is like, dun, dun, dun. Like, it never happened.
No, Kentucky ends up falling to the wrath of Magic and Bird at the same time in some pretty fucking funny ways. So, he accepts this invitation and this scholarship to go play basketball at Indiana University.
Stay home too, hometown kid.
Pretty close, yeah. And Bobby Knight, one of the most legendary college coaches ever for being a winner and just the hardest ass that ever walked up and down a basketball court. Like Chris said, chair thrower extraordinaire. There's a chance that if you ever see a video of a coach throwing the chair, it's Bobby Knight, the same guy.
If you ever see someone doing that Even in a joking, mocking manner, it's imitating Bobby Knight.
Yeah. The same man that I think in his Hall of Fame speech, he asked the reporters that when he dies, they bury him upside down so everybody can kiss his ass. Just a very hard-nosed guy. Bird being such a shy kid and having so much trouble and anxiety and kind of not being around a lot of people didn't really take well to the Indiana campus. And after 3 weeks at Indiana, he dropped out of school and came back to French Lick. This also kind of becomes an issue because his father, Joe, after splitting up from the family and leaving them, got behind on child support payments. And once he was told that he was going to be, I believe it was taken to jail for the missed child support payments, he called his wife and the kids and told them that they would just be better off without him. And then he dropped the phone and shot himself. So I'm sure that Larry, who has trouble kind of being an extrovert and being outside, and then his father committing suicide, was probably pretty shook up.
Yeah.
But Larry, always having to do something, came back. He had rolled at like a local kind of community college there in French Lick, and he was a garbage man. So he would go around and paint benches for the city, and he was a garbage man.
God, you got to imagine everyone's like, what are you doing back here, man?
Yeah, you were the biggest thing to come out of French Lick.
Like, what is going on?
Why would you come back? What in 3 weeks you didn't even get a practice in? Yeah. So why are you back here? What went wrong? So that what would essentially be his freshman year, he spent back in French Lick. And then the Indiana State, the Sycamores, a team that had never been to a college basketball tournament. Bill Hodges, their coach, comes calling, and he convinces Bird that it's time for him to come back to the fold and to play at Indiana State. Indiana State's in Terre Haute. I think that was a little closer to French Lick than wherever Indiana's campus is. Mm-hmm. I'm having a tough time with it. And
Indianapolis? I'm going to look it up.
Okay. But there's something different about Indiana. There's a saying in Indiana that sort of sums up why Bill Hodges would have his eye on somebody that dropped out of Indiana and went back and was just a garbage man, not expecting to play basketball ever again. Was like, hey, man, we need you. In Indiana, there's a saying, and that saying is, in 49 other states, it's just basketball. Like, this is a religion in Indiana.
Hoosier shit.
Exactly. This is where we get Hoosier shit. So,
Bloomington,
Indiana? Mm-hmm. Okay. I have no idea where that is.
It is more southern.
Okay. So, yeah, you have Bird coming back to Indiana State, and once Bird gets back to playing basketball, he just thrives. Terre Haute, Indiana State's a smaller campus, and they don't really have much else going on. So any time that you have somebody that can sort of spice up a program like that, he's not going to be playing with stars. He's not going to be playing with the same guys that go to Michigan State. He's not going to be playing with the guys from Kentucky, but somehow he just happened to make it work. We got to switch that.
Oh, I got you.
But he finds this same instant success at ISU. Just his style of play is so different, and he's in a smaller conference. He's not in the Big Ten, which is a very large... Oh, shit, that's upside down.
Sausage time!
We're having some technical difficulties with the board, folks.
Adam, flip the board around. One moment, please.
Stacked it upside down.
All right, the board is flipped. We're good to go. Please continue, sir.
His first 2 seasons at ISU, he took over. He turned the Sycamores into a powerhouse. So much that after his first 2 years, this part's going to get real weird. I can't really explain to you how this happened or when it all switched over, but after his sophomore season, which I guess would have been his junior season because he had the year in Indiana and then back home, he was drafted 6th overall in the 1978 draft by the Celtics. And instead of going to the NBA, he actually chose to forego that and come back to ISU for his last season, his senior season.
Okay, so ISU had, you said they'd never been to like a tournament, like a
Nope.
national tournament. When he had, before he left or got that offer to go to the NBA, did he have them in a position to make the tournament? Had they already been in the tournament?
I'm not positive if they had been in the tournament yet, but they played in, I think it was the, it might have been like the Horizon League or something like
Okay.
that. So they may not have been to the point of
But
being good
he's
enough.
bringing them up to prominence.
Yeah.
He's like, I still got work to do. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and back then, apparently you could be drafted, and the teams, much like internationally, they can keep your rights, and they will allow you to go back and play another year in college. I don't know if it's preparatory or what, but this was just a rule that was made for. I don't know if it was made for Bird, but it was.
I was going to say, is it the Larry Bird rule? Because this seems awfully specific.
Well, they actually have something in the NBA, and again, this is absolutely pointless. It's called bird rights. Bird rights is how long a player has to have either played for you or been onto a contract before you can go beyond the salary cap to re-sign them. And they were named bird rights for Larry Bird. So I don't really know how that plays in, but that's the whole reason behind that. And on his way back, 1978, Bird and Magic play in one of the biggest shows of propaganda that the United States basketball has ever been a part of. They were selected to play together on something that was called the FIBA World Invitational Team. Now, the FIBA World Invitational, I don't know why it's FIBA, because it's the International Federation Basketball Association. So I feel like that would be IFBA, but we can't.
If it's foreign, it's the Federation del Internacional. Remember how it's the
Okay. That makes
and it seems
sense.
like it's them playing against a lot of other countries, just like it is with the FIA, the Federation International Automobile or whatever.
Well,
If it's foreign, they mix up their words, Adam.
when I say this is a piece of propaganda, this was going to be a 4-team round robin tournament. And this 4-team round robin tournament included the United States, which did not have a formed Olympic team, international team, because every year, this was back before professionals could play. So it was all amateurs that they would just remake a team every single year.
Are you talking like a miracle situation? The
Could be
miracle
a dream almost.
Okay.
So these other 3 teams that they played against, these are classic world basketball powerhouses: Cuba, Russia, and Yugoslavia. I don't know why those were chosen. I'm sure that basketball,
Baseball, gymnastics, more gymnastics.
but there's no way that there was Cuban, Russian, and Yugoslav basketball players in the NBA yet.
Not even that. They weren't professionals, probably.
No.
They were probably just like college kids that like college basketball or something like that. If they even had some semblance of that.
They were just absolute garbage. And this was just, it was played in the United States. The last game was played at Rupp Arena in Kentucky. And the reason that I point that out, Bird and Magic were both selected for this team. They were both selected as backups. And the reason why this was definitely a propaganda hit was because the Kentucky coach was the coach that was chosen after winning the national championship to coach this FIBA team. And then, along with that, a way that they thought they could speed up without having to practice would be to invite the 5 starters from Kentucky to come be the starters on the FIBA team so they wouldn't have to teach everybody else a different offense.
And also at the same time, you couldn't ignore Magic and Larry as part of this team because then it would be obvious that this guy. So if you're going to have them on the team, then you're going to put them in a backup role.
Well, yeah, because they don't know the offense.
Yeah.
So, in practice, Magic and Bird, this was the first time they had ever met. Magic had heard about Bird, Bird had heard about Magic just through college, I'm sure, watching highlights and the like. They had known of each other, they had never ever met. One of the strategies that the Kentucky coach wanted was he believed that the Russians were going to run a press. Now, a press is when a shot's made and the ball is inbounded from underneath the hoop. The defense is all the way sucked up against you. Normally, they wait at the half-court line for you to show up.
Everybody is playing on a man.
Yep.
And so you're guarding one man versus what's called a zone defense, which are basically imagine like you're standing in front of the hoop and everyone's responsible for a zone. If the ball or player comes into that, it's that person's responsibility. So in basketball, imagine you make a hoop, you get to go ahead and jog back and kind of take a breather and set up for them to approach you versus a press, which is you are running the entire time trying to keep up with your person. It's a lot fucking more exhausting for both sides.
Yeah. And maybe call this a little bit of revenge. Call this a little bit of maybe karma, but his idea was they needed to figure out an offense to go ahead and break this Russian press that they were going to face. Unfortunately, they were doing it against the backups. And Bird and Magic were basically the same style of player. They were just personality-wise completely different. Never talked, never really had a plan, an idea, or anything like that. And they were supposed to be the ones to put this press on. Every time Kentucky would inbounds the ball, the first thing that Bird would do would be to go to the defender or the offensive guy that has the ball, and he would immediately try to push him to go the opposite direction. Magic, seeing this happen, would see where he was going to be swinging the ball around as he was dribbling the other direction, and would immediately pinpoint that. And he would steal the ball every time. They go down and get a layup. They could not break this press. And Magic and Bird were the two guys in the front of the press across half court that were stopping this.
It never got past them.
They also had a guy who played with them named Sidney Moncrief. He was a two-time defensive NBA player of the year. Very, very good. So he was helping them.
3 out of the 5 are fucking high caliber.
It got to a point where...
And the other guy on the backup is still one of the top players in the day. Okay, yeah, so yeah.
It got to a point where the Kentucky coach just had to quit the drill and go to something else because the offense couldn't get the ball past Bird and Magic. And when it came to the games, they won every single game very handily, but really the only thing that Bird and Magic were there to do was to give the Kentucky starters a break. And every time they came in, Magic would talk about it, and he'd say every time that they came in, they would be up 8 points. Every time Bird and Magic would end up being pulled, they were up at least 16 because they were just absolutely eating these other teams alive. And the passing between the two of them, for two guys that had never ever played together, this was the first time they'd ever seen each other. It was just like they knew exactly where each other were going to be on the court.
Can you watch these games? Are they Oh, really?
These were a little bit grainy. The national championship that we'll talk about is, I believe I watched it on YouTube. It was, there was like 3 websites pulled up, but I think it was YouTube. And it's phenomenal. Watching these two pass is like watching an art form that's just completely lost. No-look passes, around the back, through the legs, just anything that you can think of, these guys were getting away with. But this sort of changed Magic and Bird's relationship because Magic went home to all of his boys. He's like, I've never seen a white guy play like this. This guy is one of the best players that I've ever seen play. And Bird went back to Indiana State and was like, Magic is the king. Magic knows everything. He's not really my guy personally. we don't jive in that way, but he's like on the court, he's undeniable. And so they both go back to college. They end up winning this rigged invitational that they threw and head back to college. 1979 national championship rolls around, where the now undefeated Indiana State Sycamores go into the national championship against Magic in Michigan State. And this is the first time that these guys lock horns.
Okay, so this is Magic's sophomore year.
Yep.
And this is Larry's senior year.
Yep.
Okay.
So you have both guys knowing they're most likely going to the NBA. Bird already knows he's in the NBA. This college game is still to this day from 1979 the most watched college basketball game of all time. 35 million people tuned in to watch this game. And this was like the one time where it felt like somebody had figured out Bird. Michigan State called their defense the bird cage, and it was basically to keep 2 and 3 guys on Bird at a time because Indiana State wasn't attracting anybody else good. Bird was the entire team. He was the entire guy.
Yeah.
So if you could shut down Bird and you can make him have a bad night, you stood a pretty good chance to win. This is where Larry, in a few interviews, just absolutely, it shakes me to know that this guy is focused on his failures this much. He was talking about the game, and he goes, I missed 3 free throws that entire game, I think. He didn't think. He knew. He missed 3 free throws that entire game. He went 7 for 21. They just had him hemmed in, but those 7 shots were impossible shots because he was being guarded by 2 and 3 guys at a time. They end up losing their undefeated season, 75-64. Magic got the college tournament most outstanding player, but Bird won the college basketball player of the year that year. So even though Magic got the national championship, Bird was considered the best player in college that year. So there's just this rivalry that starts forming basically from the get-go.
Looking at it from the perspective of it's Bird's last year and last opportunity to win Player of the Year, do you think any of that factored in of them saying Magic is maybe going to be here for another year and he could win it next year? Because
Yeah.
possibly, but also at the same time, Bird had taken this fucking like previously
ragtag group of basketball team.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. That's probably why. That makes more sense.
Well, there was
Like, what could Bird have done on Magic's team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Magic had played with a couple guys that went to the NBA. There was a couple guys that got drafted, but nobody that was really a massive star. Magic had said that after his freshman year, he was approached by the Kansas City Kings. And this is where we get into some weird old-timey things. The Kansas City Kings, not the Sacramento Kings. They were playing in Kansas City back then. Mm-hmm. This was also the time when the Clippers were playing in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So just forever ago. They had the first pick, and they had told Magic, they said, hey, we're going to take you 1-1 if you come out this year. And Magic's like, oh, I can get that money. I can play professionally. That's not bad. He goes and he talks to his dad, and he says, what do you think I should do? And his dad goes, son, you've been poor for 18 years. If you've been poor for 18 years, you can be poor for 19 years. Stick around, get that national championship, and see where you go from there. Mm-hmm. So he decides to come back. They win the national championship. All of a sudden...
So is that the second one that they've won?
No, that was the first one.
That was the one against...
That was the one against Bird.
Okay, gotcha.
So he could have left his freshman year. He would have been the number one pick. He decided to stick around for one more year and went ahead and did that. 79 NBA draft shows up. Magic goes 1-1 to the Lakers. Bird has done his last year in college, so he is going to go play with the Celtics. And in Bird's first season with the Celtics, he turned them around to the tune of a 32-game change. So they won 32 more games his first season than they had previously the season before without him.
Jesus.
Just an insane change.
For one player to have that much of an impact with 9 other players on the court is fucking nuts.
On a storied franchise.
Yeah.
A franchise that had already been a powerhouse. They ended up getting beat in the playoffs by the Sixers, and a little guy named Dr. J was running Philadelphia back then. The Lakers, on the other hand, with Magic, just... they're a powerhouse. They have Kareem playing center. Their team is just, they're great. I don't know how they ended up. I should have looked into it as to how they ended up with the first pick in the draft because that seemed a little bit weird. But Magic goes ahead and takes them all the way to the finals. And Magic going to L.A. with Dr. Buss, the owner of the Lakers.
Watch Showtime. If anyone here hasn't watched it, what's it on?
HBO.
It is HBO.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
John C. Reilly plays Dr. Buss. It's fucking phenomenal.
It's just a wild guy. But this is where Magic kind of becomes the alter ego of Irvin because Magic was from Lansing. Or Irvin was from Lansing. Magic was from Hollywood. And Magic sucked up that role. Dr. Buss would take him to the Playboy Mansion with Hugh Hefner. He would go out with stars routinely. He was out at all the clubs. He was out having fun. He was just the extrovert's extrovert. Mm-hmm. He was the most extroverted guy ever. Paired with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, formerly Lou Alcindor, when he was playing at UCLA. A phenomenal player. One time, again, scored the most points in the NBA ever. Was just very, very good. But he was the most introverted, quiet guy ever.
Was he also kind of more at the tail end of his career?
He plays a while longer, but he had already been in Milwaukee, so he had already played for, I think, probably 6 years, maybe, somewhere around there. First game of the season, they go ahead and come out. Kareem hits a signature skyhook that was Kareem's from the foul line. Basically, there was like 2 seconds left. He is facing towards out of bounds. He throws a hook up over his head that he hit more times than any human ever should, but he just perfected it. Hits it at the buzzer, scores, they win. Magic comes sprinting up to him and jumps on him and wraps his arm around Kareem's neck, and he just held on to him like he was riding a bull It was like they just won the national championship 10 times over. Like he was so fucking excited. They got back to the locker room, and Kareem looks at him. He goes, "If you ever do that again, you will be off this team faster than anything." Magic looks back at him. He goes, he goes, "We have 81 more games to play this season. You can't be acting like that every single time that happens." And Magic looks back at him, a rookie, a fresh-faced rookie, talking to one of the best players in the league. He goes, "If you do that 81 more times to end a game, I will do that 81 more times to your big ass."
Yeah.
It's just the absolute polar opposites. Just the way that they went about life. And Magic was just always such a happy dude. So they make it to the finals. They go ahead and beat Dr. J and the Sixers. And this is where we get the magical Game 6. The magical Game 6 of the finals is where Kareem had hurt his leg and actually didn't travel to Philadelphia with him. So on the plane ride over, Kareem would always take seat 1A on the plane because he was the 1A guy. He was just that guy. Magic finagled his way onto a plane early, and he sat in Kareem's seat. When everybody walked by, he goes, "I'm going to be Kareem tonight. Don't you worry about it." Goes and tells Pat Riley, the coach, again, a Hall of Fame coach, he says, "Start me at center tonight." Pat Riley goes, "No, I'm not going to play my point guard at center. You're going to play point guard." He goes, No. Play your rookie point guard at center." He goes, "All right, we'll see what happens." They go out for the tip-off. Magic does the tip-off. Magic plays all 5 positions that game on offense and defense. He starts at center as their point guard on their team because he's 6'9" and he's that good. He ends up putting up a stat line of 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 steals.
This is a rookie player playing against veterans on the other best team, on the second best team in the NBA.
Yeah. And has just a world beater of a game that nobody ever could have predicted out of this guy. This is a point guard in the NBA that's pulling down 15 rebounds over 7-foot tall guys in the biggest game that he's ever played in his entire life. And somehow he just has the stones to do that. So they win their first championship. Magic becomes one of only 4 players to ever go back-to-back, winning a college national championship and then winning an NBA championship in the next year. It's only been completed 4 times in the history of the NBA. Pretty amazing.
And most of those guys probably aren't the guys that are leading the team
No?
to that. They just happen to be on the team that wins. That's probably an already good established team.
Yeah, if you're the 4th best player on a national championship team and you get picked by the team that's ready to win the
in the 3rd round or the 4th round or something that has that pick, yeah.
I think they still only had 2 back then, but yeah, you could be picked and you could ride the bench and still get that. So it doesn't matter. As long as you're on the teams, you can do that.
I think this one's different.
Yeah. And poetically, just like before, Magic goes ahead and wins the finals MVP. Bird wins the Rookie of the Year. So there's still that deal where Bird
did more with less. That kind of seems to be a theme.
Yeah, well, and it's just, it pissed Magic off to no end because they were both rookies and that was how the line was going to be drawn. But Bird made such a big change on his team. They didn't win a championship, but at the same time, 32-game difference took them all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, like a very big deal. And
he didn't have why am I?
Rookie of the Year?
No, who was the guy that was on the Lakers?
Oh, Kareem?
Yeah, he didn't have a Kareem.
I mean, he still had shit at that point. That was before Robert Parrish. That was before Kevin McHale. That was before Bill Walton. They still were pretty good as far as having a couple other very talented players to play with him. But yeah, I mean, he was still just the star of the team. He didn't have a guy that was coming in that was already a top 2 player in the league like Kareem was.
That makes more sense.
But it ate Magic up. Magic, even though he won a championship, is like, I should have been the Rookie of the Year. That should have been mine. While on the other side,
if I'm the Finals MVP, I'm a rookie that just won the Finals
Yeah.
and was the best player in the Finals. That should automatically get me Rookie of the Year. Because no other rookie did that.
Yeah, but on the other side of that coin, Bird sees that the guy that just beat him for a national championship just won an NBA championship before him too. And it drives him fucking crazy. Comes back the next year, and in 1981, Bird Celtics end up winning an NBA championship against the Rockets in 6 games.
So the Magic won the 80.
Lakers,
Yeah, first season, 1980. Gotcha.
yep,
Okay.
Lakers won that one. 1981, Bird and the Celtics beat the Rockets in 6 games. Magic had kind of been a little bit dinged up that year. He'd had a knee surgery. They just kind of weren't what they were. But now Bird's back in the race. Bird's got an NBA championship. Magic's got an NBA championship. Magic still has that collegiate championship over him. 1982, again, following right back up. It's so crazy how close these years were that these teams just battled back and forth. The 82 Lakers beat the Sixers again. That gave Magic 2 NBA championships to Bird's 1. Magic again becomes the finals MVP. 83, the Lakers back in the championship again, get swept finally by Dr. J and Moses Malone. So 4-0, they ended up losing. At the beginning of the 1984 season, Magic signed something called the 25-25 contract, which was 25 years for $25 million, which was a contract that was just unheard of back then. He became the highest paid basketball player. And I want to say if he signed that in 1984, in 20 years from then, it would be 2004. So his contract would have been up technically in 2009 from signing a contract.
It only goes out to $1 million a year, though. Weren't there other contracts that were bigger than that?
Well, every time that there would be somebody that would be higher paid than $1 million a year, they would start to restructure his money to try to make it better and better for him. But it was basically a lifetime contract. Nobody's playing 25 years in the NBA,
course.
Especially after already having 3 years under your belt.
Bobby Bonilla.
Yeah, this very big Bobby Bonilla vibes for sure. 1984, Magic and Bird face off in the first NBA championship against each other, and this was a fight.
They had been circling each other. Yeah.
One of the first plays of the first game, Magic drives to the hoop, and Bird goes ahead and fouls him real hard. Sort of hey man, I'm here, and we're about to really make this happen. And
you're not walking to this one.
This starts a scuffle that sort of embodies this whole thing where all of Magic's big guys go ahead and rush over. At this time, Kevin McHale was playing with Bird and I believe Robert Parrish. Robert Parrish was the big chief, the guy that looked high every time he played a game. Kevin McHale is a giant white man who knew how to fight very, very well. And you just see these two rivals coming together and their teammates supporting them. The other kind of big thing that's going on when all this is happening, and the reason that I would say Magic and Bird saved the NBA is because prior to this rivalry, everything was pre-taped. So playoff games, championship games were so unpopular that if they had, like Dallas was a big show back in that era. If there was a new episode of Dallas that was going up against an NBA playoff game, the playoff game would be taped so Dallas could show in its time slot, and then the NBA playoff games or championship games would be shown later on at night. That was how
That's
low.
fucking crazy to think about now.
That was how low on the totem pole NBA or the NBA was at that time.
Dallas was a great show.
I'm sure it was. All I know about that is somebody shot JR, and I don't know who.
Delta Burke, right?
Well, I don't fucking know. Sure, whatever. I'm assuming Dallas happened in
I
Dallas.
don't think Delta Burke. I think that was Designing Women. I think I'm confusing my shows.
But these guys brought a different fire, and unfortunately with that fire came a very weird color division line of, and I'll say this, I'm fine saying this as a lifelong Boston Red Sox fan, Boston fans are a tad racist. Judging by all the stories that I've heard about guys that have played in Boston as Red Sox and been in the outfield and been called a lot of things that start with N.
By their own fans?
By their own fans when they screw up, any visiting players. Adam Jones, a center fielder for Baltimore, had a pretty famous incident when he was playing there. But they've always been white-collar, white guys who aren't necessarily big fans of black people. And you could kind of see that the racial division of the Showtime Lakers, the guys that are playing
They're
out
polar
west.
opposites.
Yeah.
Even the teams, like one's flash, one's working class. Like there was already a divide there.
And so there were these lines that were kind of drawn to where these fan bases were just fucking vicious. And Bird would talk about how there's one of my favorite things about doing this at this time was we're recording this 5 days after Bill Walton passed away. Bill Walton's one of my favorite sports personalities ever. He went to UCLA. He played for John Wooden. He brought the Portland Trailblazers their only championship, I believe. An all-around funny guy, the biggest deadhead in the world. He used to tour in his off time with the Grateful Dead. Just did all sorts of drugs, was the wildest guy. And to listen to him call a game or to tell a story, he was just such a fun figure. He was awesome. And there was one point in time, I think this is getting
like
ahead.
Basketball Gandalf.
A little bit, yeah. He could start telling you a story, and he could tell 6 stories, and then he would still end up with the conclusion of the first story that he was going to tell you. But Walton, I think this was in '86, after he had played for the Blazers, and it was a playoff game. He comes back into the locker room, and he's all shook up, and somebody asks him what's going on. He goes, "Those fans out there want blood. They don't care if it's ours or theirs." They're just savages. But this series was a fight, and this series ends up this first series that they play ends up going all the way to 7 games.
So who won the first game? The Celtics win the first game, right?
I believe the Lakers won the first game. I think they won the first 2, and then the Celtics kind of started their run, and they went back and traded back and forth.
Okay.
But you start seeing these odd things going on with Magic where it kind of seems like his decision-making is a step too slow. There's a game where the clock is running out and they're actually down, and the game ends with Magic holding the ball, like not getting the ball to a shooter after he was covered, not trying to make a shot, anything like that. And it just started to seem like the Celtics had this mental edge. They were tougher, they were gritty, they were more of a grinding team, and they ended up grinding out this win in 7 games. Bird gets his first Finals MVP. He gets his second championship that ties him up with Magic. And this was actually the first MVP for the regular season of 3 straight MVP awards that he would win. So he was the most valuable player of the NBA 3 straight years in a row, which is another very rare feat. Less rare now because Giannis has gotten a bunch of them, and I think Jokic just did it this year. But it was something that, wasn't really heard of back then.
It just shows you how dominant somebody has to be consistently league-wide.
Yeah.
Not just in a series.
And there's, to go along with Bird's kind of prolific shit talk, if Magic was the best ball handler that I've ever seen, Bird might be the best shit talker that I've ever heard. Michael Jordan, who I always kind of expected to be king shit talker, actually said that he learned all of his smack from Larry Bird. Larry Bird was so good at basketball that he could tell the defender where he was going and where he was going to shoot, and he would do exactly what he said despite how many times and how many ways they tried to stop him. Larry Bird was so good at basketball that before a game, he told his teammates that he was going to only shoot left-handed for the entire game. They won that game. He said that he played 3.5 quarters left-handed, but when it got close, he switched back to his right to make sure that they didn't lose while he was doing something stupid.
Yeah.
But he was just that good that he could shoot with his offhand for an entire game and still end up winning that game. He was prolific for if he ever heard a coach telling his defender what to do on him, he would make it a point to score on that guy as many times as possible, and up the court every single time he would say, "Man, you should listen to your coach on that one. You should have gotten up into my face." Just the constant banter back and forth. And I'm sure that was that little kid in French Lick that was talking shit to the older kids, knowing that his brothers were going to be there to fight for him. But he was just so good at basketball that no matter what happened, and these guys tell these stories now, where like, if you get really embarrassed as a professional athlete, it's probably not a story that you want to tell.
Yeah.
But it's almost like there's this group that had played against Bird that got shit talked so much and beat up so bad that it's like they're a fraternity of
I was going to say
men.
it's like a brotherhood.
Yeah. To where they'll
a
tell
brotherhood
these
of Larry
stories.
Bird victims. Yeah.
They'll tell these stories.
It's a
with
support group, essentially. Yeah.
With a smile on their face. There are guys that say that Bird would come out before tip-off would happen and he'd go, "You better have your shoes tied tight because I'm going to be on your ass the entire night." Just had no fear of anybody out there. And Magic was kind of his foil. And they went back and forth because just after that first series that they play each other in 84, 85 we get a rematch. 85 we get a rematch where the Lakers had figured out what went wrong last year and how they ended up getting beat by the Celtics and ended up taking that series in 6 games. So it was just this push and pull back and forth between them. 1985 off season. This is where we get sort of a bummer. This kind of shows who Larry Bird was. Larry had made his money. Larry had made a ton of money. Larry bought his mom a very big home back in French Lick. But the way that Larry was, he wasn't going to do anything anyway but his own way. And he actually injures his back shoveling gravel for his mother's driveway. An NBA player.
Not just an NBA player.
Yeah, Larry Bird.
Yeah. The finals MVP, league MVP, ready to go against another team that you know you're going to be battling against to get back to the finals. And you're shoveling gravel.
Yep, on your mom's driveway. And sadly, this was kind of like the first nail in Bird's coffin because his back just always kind of gave him trouble after that. But it was just kind of like I don't know. It really bums me out to know what Bird could have been, but at the same time, I don't know if he could have done any better than he actually did, like if he had a little bit longer career. But yeah, we get in 1986 before the season starts, one of my favorite things, and you knew that we were going to hit shoes. You knew that this was going to come out eventually. Converse had signed Larry Bird, and they had signed Magic Johnson. Larry Bird had a black Converse. They were called the Birds. I think later on, Magic had the Lethal Weapons, and they kind of shared it. But they were called the Converse Birds. They were all black shoes with the white arrow and star that was Converse's old original logo that you see on all the Chuck Taylors. Magic's were all white with purple and yellow in that same configuration. 2 biggest stars in the NBA. What do you got to do? You got to get them together for a commercial.
Oh, yeah.
So they approach Larry and they say, "We want you to do this commercial with Magic." And Larry's like, "You want me to go to Hollywood?" And like, "Well, yeah, that's where Magic is." He's like, "Fuck no. If you guys want to do this commercial, we're doing it in French Lick." So they approach Magic and they're like, "Hey, we're going to do this commercial with you and Bird." And Magic goes, "We're doing it in LA?" And he goes, "No, we're doing it in French Lick." Magic's like, "All right, let's go." So Magic ends up traveling to Bird's hometown and they actually shoot the commercial on his mom's property. And when they do it, this is the first time when Larry and Magic actually like get to start spending some time alone with each other, and they kind of start feeling each other out. And Magic said that this was the first time that Larry had met Irvin, and it was the first time where they could ever actually like have a heart to heart and talk. And in one of the scenes, they're supposed to be playing one-on-one, and
What's crazy is they're like mid-20s,
yeah,
maybe late 20s.
But they've been combatants for so
I know,
long,
and they've never had an opportunity. It was always saw them on opposite sides. It's not like during you're not together during the regular season, and then in the finals you're being kept separate and everything. There's no reason for you guys to go. You're trying to beat the other person.
Well, and their whole point of view was Magic said that when he first saw Larry out on the court in the NBA to play for the first time, he smiled at him and he walked over to him. And Larry says that he didn't see him. I don't know who's who in this situation and who could be right. Magic said that some of Larry's teammates walked in between them, so Magic couldn't say anything, but Larry never made eye contact. And he said, "I don't know what it was." Larry said, "I didn't see him that night. the same time, though, he's the enemy when we're out there. I'm not out there to give hugs and high fives to the other guy that I have to go out there and play and beat. And it's just this mentality that he's always had. But now that they're out shooting a commercial away from the court, they say, we need you guys to play some one-on-one for this game, or for this commercial. And they go, do you want us to play real one-on-one, or do you want us to mess around? And as they're talking about it, Larry goes, you're not going to want to play real one-on-one because I'm going to beat your ass. And Magic goes, this is what we're going to do. We're actually going to play. And as soon as the director of the commercial started, it's like, no. We're not going full speed. We just need to get some shots for this commercial. And so they were both kind of put at ease because that competitive juice was immediately taken out of it after that. They cut for lunch the first day, and Magic asked him where he could go in and get food. And Larry goes, you're not going anywhere. My mom made us lunch. Let's go inside. Let's go inside and eat. And they go inside and eat. Magic charms the pants off of Larry's mom. She just absolutely loves Magic at that point. And they just kind of walk around her property and talk about life and kind of get this appreciation and love for each other after trying to kill each other on numerous occasions of hard fouls and just wanting to beat the hell out of the other one. But they finally get this parallel where it's just a friendship of two guys who are polar opposites personality-wise, but are basically the same kind of basketball player. Like it's just
one of them adopted a persona when his real demeanor was probably closer to Larry.
Yeah, and he loved being an extrovert. Magic was always out in the open. He was always going out. Larry was always looking for a side door.
As you know, not to like bring psychology into it or anything, but as one of 10 kids, when you probably don't get a lot of attention, being one of 10 kids,
Yep.
being able to get everyone's attention, that's got to be just your dream come true. But at the same time, you're still that kid that knows how to be alone, that knows how to not having attention is probably comfortable for you to a degree. So you can go back to that once you get your attention. And when he's around Larry for like that time and everything, being able to just be like, I don't need attention right now.
Well, it's that whole persona, that whole Magic and Irvin being two different people. Irvin came back out, just like you were talking about. That kid from Lansing was in French Lick. I mean, it wasn't Magic there anymore. Even though the commercial's awesome because Magic pulls up to the court in a limousine, and it's totally Hollywood meets Indiana.
Is it an actual court or is it dirt?
It's an actual court that he put out there. That was one of the things. Magic asked him if he ever comes back and plays on this court, and he goes, in the off season, this is where I am every day. Like, he's just back home in Indiana playing on this court that he built at his mom's house because that was just what he knew. Bird said that the reason he was such a good shooter was because he had the confidence of playing alone so much and seeing his shot go in so much. He knew that if he could do it in that situation, he could do it wherever he wanted to.
Yeah.
And just a supreme confidence that comes out of nowhere.
You want to do a bathroom break?
Yeah, sure.
All right. We'll be right back. Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials! Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I mean, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. All right, where we at?
We are headed to 1996, or 1986. 1986 is going to be the last NBA championship for Mr. Bird. They go ahead and they beat the Rockets. Bird becomes the MVP of the finals again. And this is the last tournament, or the last NBA championship that Bird wins, which is pretty special. It's not his last one, because his last one would come in 1987 on his way to the 1987 finals appearance, again facing Magic for one last time. In the Eastern Conference Finals, they play the Pistons and end up dispatching the Pistons pretty easily. This is the time when our old friend Dennis Rodman played for the Pistons. And after the game, they were talking about it after the elimination. Rodman makes a very Rodman-esque statement to the media, and he says the only reason that you guys give Larry Bird all the press that you do is because he's white. If he was a black player, he would just be another good player. He wouldn't be Larry Bird. Isaiah Thomas, who famously has run afoul of Michael Jordan and who was very close friends with Magic Johnson, kind of laughed and he agreed with what Rodman had said. This wasn't something that Bird brought up. This wasn't something that he ever needed to be a part of. But as soon as that narrative gets out into the media, of course, he's going to be asked about it. And Bird handles it in really the only way that Bird could. He came out, he said, stuff like that's never bothered me. Everybody is going to have their opinion. They're going to say what they're going to say. You just go on about your business. I can remember after that game, somebody come up to me right away after they talked to Isaiah, but really it wasn't that big of a deal. We had fierce battles against Detroit at that time, and we knew as we went on, we were going to have a lot more. But I think I said it back then, and I say it today, stuff like that don't bother me. I mean, just the most classic high road that he could ever take. Mm-hmm. And there was kind of this weird racial undertone to the Bird and Magic saga that could never really be there because Bird had already made reference. He grew up playing with black basketball players. Yeah. He grew up playing with guys that formed and shaped his game. Mm-hmm. He wasn't bringing any of this animus that was coming from the fans and from the reporters about this black-white rivalry because he was just there to play basketball.
Yeah.
That's all he ever cared about.
And that was the series before they met Lakers in the finals.
It was the same. Yeah, it was that series right before. Okay. So that was the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, 1987. The finals appearance for Bird comes against his old friend Magic for one last time. The Lakers end up winning that 4-2, and Magic is the MVP. And I mean, it was the end of the championship time for Magic, and Bird had said, as the team was kind of starting to age, they were kind of starting to change. They were always good. They were always competitive. But it was at a part of their careers where McHale played one season, like half a season, with a broken foot. A giant guy playing on a broken foot's never going to be a good game. Larry's back starts catching up to him. He starts to have to basically lay down on the sidelines to keep his back from seizing up because there's just so much stress on it. It was, I believe it was orthopedist that was talking in the documentary, and he said that Larry's spine was so bad that if it ever got out of alignment, in order to stop itself from catastrophic injury, all of the muscles would seize up around it. So before games, Larry would have to have this massage and adjustment that would allow him to go out and play on the court that night. And then after the game, before it froze up again, he would have to have another one. But he was just in constant pain all the time. At one point, I believe, he ruptures both of his Achilles at the same time.
Jesus Christ.
Just these crazy injuries that happened to him kind of out of nowhere. But 1988 is going to be Magic's last championship. Not his last time in there, but his last championship. They end up beating the Bad Boy Pistons in 7 games. Which kind of is the beginning of the Pistons. I don't know if you would call it a dynasty, but their back-to-back wins, their kind of ascent to the top of the NBA as the Bad Boy Pistons that replaced the Showtime Lakers and replaced Bird Celtics. Magic throughout his career would win 3 MVPs, 1987, 1989, 1990. Another notable stat for Larry Bird, he was the first 3-point contest winner, and he actually won the first 3. And again, another very, very famous shit talk line from Bird. That first year when he walked into the locker room before the 3-point line, or before the 3-point contest, and all of the other contestants were in there, he walks in and he asks who's taking second place. Because he was just that supremely confident that he could go out and win, that he wanted to know who was going to come in second to him. Just the most confident guy ever. Magic would end up losing his last finals appearance to Michael Jordan in 1991. They got beat pretty bad, 4-1. Prior to the next season coming up.
Passing of the torch type situation.
Yeah, Jordan was, had done everything that he could. He finally gets Pippen. They finally start to kind of give him a little bit more help, and as soon as he gets it, he just runs with it. And this is where that quick changeover from the Pistons winning to Jordan figuring out an Eastern Conference with Larry and the Celtics, Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons. He's got a hard road to get to where he needs to play the Lakers, and ends up just smoking them. Prior to that next season, 91-92, Johnson's physical comes back and reveals that he contracted HIV.
Not to detract from that moment. Sorry. When did Larry retire?
It's still coming.
They haven't retired yet. They're still playing. Okay.
Still playing, still trying. They're still pretty routinely making the playoffs. They have guys like Vinnie Johnson. They have, again, Parrish.
They're not having to do as much.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're still getting there, but at the same time, it's kind of like if they can get everybody healthy enough to go on a run, they'll go on a run. But if they can't, they can't.
Sorry. Back to the reveal.
Back to the AIDS. Back to the HIV.
There you go.
This kind of came as a pretty big shock because in the early 90s, there was a very big belief that HIV was still only a gay man's disease. And the belief was that if Magic had gotten HIV, it was because he had had gay sex, when it really couldn't have been further from the truth. And Magic admits it himself that over a lifetime of having hundreds of female partners, he had contracted AIDS, or had contracted HIV. Also, another real kick to the gut was I believe that happened, and he got that information 3 weeks after he had just married his wife, Cookie. So, a real roller coaster of emotions that's going on. But at the same time, this is the first major sports case of HIV ever happening.
Yeah.
So it changes.
I don't want to I don't think this is making light on it, but if you say HIV an athlete, it's Magic Johnson. That's just.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know if there's anybody else. Arthur Ashe, but Arthur Ashe got it through blood transfusion. And he was a tennis player, so not a big four sports guy. But it was just such.
But a lot of that stuff is probably kept confidential if anybody does. That's not going to get out to the public like
True.
this. Yeah.
But also, at this time, there was so little information about it that everybody in the league is scared.
Yeah.
Magic says that after this happens, he's talking to his doctor. His doctor's like, we caught it, fairly early for what we know. We're going to try to treat it as well as possible. In the meantime, you need to do everything to give your body enough of a fighting chance to fight against this. So he's still going into the Lakers facility and he's shooting around. He's trying to play with everybody else. And in fucking just a horribly sad interview, he's talking about how he's walking up to the guys that are on his team, his teammates that have played with him for his entire career at some points, and asking them if they want to play one-on-one, if they want to run twos. But everybody's so scared and concerned that if Magic has a cut on him or if they make contact in the post that they're going to get HIV. Mm-hmm. To the point toward they just kind of leave him be and aren't there to support him.
He's ostracized.
Yeah. And at the same time, his very good friend Isaiah Thomas is rumored to have maybe started spreading his own rumors about Magic getting it via gay sex. Mm-hmm. And just something that I think sort of drove a wedge between them for a while. Magic, being the angel that he is back in good graces, or Isaiah's back in the good graces of Magic. Magic's, I guess, a very forgiving man, or maybe he never said it, but it was a pretty heavily implied rumor that Isaiah Thomas was stirring some shit. On the other side of this is kind of, I don't know, for these guys being as competitive and as close as they were, just kind of on and off. Larry said that when he found out, he was told, hey, you got to call Magic. And he goes, why? What's going on? And he goes, or whoever he was talking to said the report just came out, Magic has HIV. And Larry said that he didn't believe it until he actually heard it from Magic's mouth because he wanted to hear it from him. He said they had a phone call. They started talking about family, how everybody was doing, everything was going on. He talked to him about his wedding, and then he finally said, are the rumors true? And Magic said, yeah. And you could see the night I don't know if it was that night or it was the night that Magic had retired for the first time, but they were showing clips of Larry playing in that game and he was crying on the court. Like he didn't want to be there. And he talks about how it was one of the worst basketball games that he'd ever played. His mind wasn't there because his mind was with his buddy.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, I don't know, it was a rough situation where Magic had actually stepped away from the team. He had retired before the season had started, partially because they didn't really know how it was going to affect him. Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, there was so much panic around the league that somebody could contract it from Magic.
They didn't know enough.
Yeah.
Like, it was just all fear.
Exactly. And so Magic steps away. That very season, all of the fans voted Magic a starter in the All-Star game. And Magic came back and he played in the All-Star game and ended up being the MVP of the All-Star game that year. In a very, again, shitty twist, there were guys that refused to play in the All-Star game for the same reason that they refused to play with him on the court during the regular season. So his career is on a hiatus. He comes back for the All-Star game. In that same final season, 91-92, Bird's body just completely breaks down to the point to where it becomes his final season. And in that off season, after what we're going to talk about here with the Dream Team, he has a disc removed in his back. So pretty fucking heavy surgery for a guy who's been an athlete for that long.
Yeah.
Summer 1992, we come to the Dream Team. This is the first time that professional basketball players are allowed to play in the Olympics. And we get a team that was probably the most fun to watch of any team back in the 90s, 80s, what have you.
Being alive at a time when, because the Dream Team essentially played, how many seasons did they end up playing together with that core lineup?
Just the one.
It was just that one Olympics. Essentially, even remembering from a young age the buzz that was around that team.
Yeah.
And even being able to see the uniforms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that beautiful navy blue.
It was what everybody wanted to see because they no longer during the All-Star game or the NBA season had to root against other good players. Mm-hmm. Everyone was behind every player. That's what makes the Olympics, like why everyone gets behind it so much. You don't have to vote. You don't have to root. You're rooting for everybody. It's like fantasy football.
Yep.
Everyone's on your team.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of LeBron on the basketball court for 3 years and 344 days. Mm-hmm. But when he plays for the Olympics, you just cheer for him. You can't help it.
King.
Huh?
Go off, King.
Yeah, you can't help but cheer for those guys. And, excuse me, this is Magic's HIV season, essentially. It just wrapped up. Bird is on the precipice of getting disc surgery. They're both chosen for the Olympics, chosen for the Dream Team. They're playing with, oh shit, I don't think I can do everything, but they're playing with Jordan, they're playing with Karl Malone, they're playing with Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, I believe Patrick Ewing was there.
They were the old guard at this point, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and they opened so many more doors for the star power to come out of kind of bringing stars back to the game, because after that, it seems like there were stars before him. There were great guys, Pistol Pete, all those kind of players. But after that, we see the Patrick Ewings and the Hakeem Olajuwons that come out of college as just monsters. We see Michael Jordan come out of North Carolina, Charles Barkley come out of Auburn. Just everybody, we get these big names that are all coming into the league at the same time right after. And for
which we know more as big names because that was the period that kind of shaped our youth for basketball. Yeah.
That was our generation. So the Dream Team summer was, I think, a lot of fun for everybody. Dream Team went undefeated. They won all their games by an average, well, their average win for every game that they played was by 43 points. Nobody ever got close. Nobody ever even sniffed them.
It was like a Harlem Globetrotters game.
Pretty much. Except for they never let off the gas pedal at all. They had played Angola, I believe, in the first round. And Charles Barkley came out of the press conference before. He goes, I don't know nothing about Angola. I just know that Angola's in trouble.
Yeah. Like just 117 points per game.
Yeah, is how much they were averaging. It just absolutely smacked everybody around. The Monaco practice, is, I think we talked about it during the Nike episode. It was another episode that we talked about. The Monaco practice is what Michael Jordan called the greatest basketball game that he's ever played in. It was the dream team playing against each other, blue versus white, and they split it Eastern and Western Conference. So Jordan and an ailing Bird were on the Eastern Conference side, while Magic was on the Western Conference side with Stockton, Malone, maybe not Stockton, but Malone for sure, and everybody else that was chosen from the West Coast. And this game was just, they rolled the ball out and they said, go for it. And Magic talks about how they ended up taking a lead towards the end of the game and had scored 6 straight baskets. And Jordan's team called timeout. And as they were walking by, Magic made a comment about, you better stick that tongue out or you better spend more time in the air or something like that to Jordan. And Jordan walked back over to the bench and he just told everybody on the team, give me the ball. And they came back out and Magic said that they didn't score again. Jordan just absolutely beat the living shit out of him, brought his team back and just smoked them. He said when they went into the locker room, Jordan said, this is my league now. Just very confidently, this is mine. You guys were great. You guys are the old guard.
I'm pretty sure I
my
heard.
turn.
Yeah, watching the Jordan documentary, he talks about that.
Just so fucking cool. Magic and Bird both averaged 8 points.
They weren't there. They weren't there to they weren't starters.
No, but they were there kind of to have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
That was all they wanted.
That's what I'm saying. I'm
there.
not saying that in a bad way. It's just they still came in, they still scored some points and everything like that. But
and they got to spend the better part of their careers fighting against each other. But there's these little isolated moments. There's the first time that they played together on the Olympic team on the Invitational. Then there's the commercial time where they got to know each other better and care about each other. There's the time that they come together when Magic gets HIV, and this is kind of like their last ride together. They said when they were over in Barcelona, they practiced in Monaco. The Olympics were in Barcelona that year. They couldn't stay in the Olympic Village because of just security reasons, because they were the biggest thing to hit the Olympics that year. So they stayed in the hotel downtown with just gobs of security. And every single day they would walk out of the front of the hotel room, there would just be thousands of people standing out there ready for autographs. And Bird would talk about how when they were coming down the escalator, he'd look back at Magic and he wouldn't even have to really catch a glance at him before he just saw that 1,000,000-watt smile coming down the escalator, knowing that they were walking out the front door. And Bird said, I was happy for him, but I wasn't ever going to walk out there with him. He said that he had actually paid a security guard to show him a side exit that he could get out of.
Because he didn't want the attention.
Yeah, that wasn't him. That wasn't what he liked in his life, but he knew that Magic liked it and he always respected it. And Magic said that anytime there was ever a situation like that, his first thought was, is there any way that we can get out of this without Larry, being overwhelmed? So they cared enough about each other to know that, he wants to do his thing, that's fine. I'm not going to cramp his style. I'll go out the side door, or I'm going to take all this shine because Larry doesn't want it.
Yeah.
They cared about each other enough to do that for each other. Magic wasn't done. Magic came back 92, 93. He played in some preseason games. He ended up retiring again with a bunch of people in the league saying, we don't know how to handle this if he bleeds or anything like that. 94, 95, he actually comes back as coach of the Lakers, and he coaches them for 16 games. It didn't go very well. He ends up leaving after those 16 games. They were I want to say they were 5-11, something just horrible. He buys 5% of the team. So now he is 5% owner of the Lakers from Dr. Buss. And that kind of starts his entrepreneurial escapades. 95, 96, he does actually finally make a comeback. He plays for 32 games in the Lakers season that year.
Moon.
Huh?
He's Jackie Moon.
Yeah,
he owns part of the team
player.
and he plays. Okay.
He played pretty decent. I think it said, the stats that I was looking at said he came in 12th place for MVP the year that Barkley won it that year. Only playing 32 games is actually pretty surprising that he was that good. They made it to the playoffs, but were a first-round exit. That offseason, he says, I'm good. I'm retiring for good. I'm out of there. So, pretty cool how all that happens for them. Their post-playing careers, they can't quit it. Bird went on to coach his home state Pacers from 1997 to 2007,
Remember that.
or to 2000, 3 years. Second year in, becomes the 1998 Coach of the Year, which, I mean, your second year as a head coach to be the Coach of the Year is pretty big. After that, he heads to become the president of basketball operations from 2003 to 2012. Executive of the Year, 2012, wins another award. Just wherever he goes, he's just great. He bounced back again. I don't know. There's these weird kind of short pauses. Like 2012, he wins the Executive of the Year and then he leaves. Seems a little bit odd. Takes a year off. They go ahead and bring him back in 2013. He does it for 4 more years. Then he quits again, and they keep him on as a consultant.
You just got to wean yourself off of it.
Yeah, and to this day, he's still in that consultant role. I'm sure he'll leave for a little bit, and then they'll bring him back. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is, but it's like they can't quit each other.
He's like, I haven't been in this office for 3 years. He's like, but can we still call you a consultant? We just need your verbal approval for that.
Yeah, and maybe it's they want to keep him on the payroll because he's Larry Bird, and they want to make sure that he's always comfortable. And he's a great basketball mind that they want, to listen to. And I don't know if he had an effect on the Pacers this year making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but I mean he's still in somebody's ear in the organization. Magic ended up being from 2017 to 2019 the president of basketball operations for the Lakers. He's kind of the primary architect of bringing LeBron James to the Lakers today. It didn't really end up well, and he ended up kind of parting ways because he said he didn't have enough support in the front office to build a winner. I don't know if he just had a little bit of a conflict of interest or maybe it was taking up too much of his time because the guy becomes an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. It was 2023, Magic became a billionaire. Like, an athlete, I don't think he was the first, but to start from where he started and to become a billionaire off of a 25-year, $25 million contract, that's pretty big stuff.
Plus, I mean, how much do you think the guy made in endorsements?
Yeah, endorsements were big. He's actually the majority share owner of a company called Equitrust Insurance, so they're worth a ton of money. He also has Magic Johnson Enterprises, which own Magic Johnson Theaters, where he's gone into kind of urban areas and bought up movie theaters and kind of reinvented them, reinvigorated them. He actually owns 125 Starbucks stores that are in mostly urban areas too. And he actually went to I don't know what the Starbucks guy's name is. It's something I think that's pretty common, but whatever it is. And he told him, he goes, hey, I want to put these in urban areas because minorities like coffee too. Yeah. Black people like coffee too. But in all my stores, scones aren't really going to be sold. We're going to have to do some different kind of dishes to bring in the money for what's going on. And they're always in the top earners for Starbucks restaurants. They thrive because he's so good. His big accomplishments outside of becoming a billionaire and owning Starbucks and movie theaters, and he owns a production company. They do documentaries, different things like that out of the enterprises. He joined something called the Guggenheim Partners and a guy named Stan Kasten to purchase the Dodgers. So he's part of the ownership group of the Dodgers now.
Does he still have his team share of the Lakers?
Yep. So he's invested in the Lakers. He's invested in the Dodgers, and in 2023, he was a part of the investment group that bought the Washington Commanders. So
he's got basketball, baseball, and football now.
He's got ownership in every single one of those.
Are you sure the Chargers and the Rams nobody wants to sell anything? I don't want to have to go buy out of state.
Tired of flying to DC.
Yeah, I don't want to buy out of state, but if no one's willing to share or willing to sell, my hand's being forced.
Yeah, but they're two just absolutely incredible guys that somehow were in this fight friendship their entire life. That were frenemies, basically.
They were in the spotlight for a decade.
Yeah,
you got to imagine what that did for viewership of basketball. Like you said, before them and before this rivalry and how they kind of changed the face of basketball. it was fucking watching Dallas instead of watching a live playoff or championship basketball game.
Yeah, it changed everything. All of the rights for TV contracts that fuel the massive amount of money that comes into the NBA.
Would people have been aware of Michael Jordan as much as if the NBA would have stayed kind of stagnant and everything all the way up till it would have gotten popular with Michael Jordan, but it would have taken more time. He got to come into the league and be instantly popular, and everyone was already watching at the time.
Yeah.
These guys were kind of the trailblazers that did that.
Well, and even to go a step below that, the most watched college basketball game of all time.
Yeah.
You can say that they also kind of catapulted college basketball into churning out the stars that came after them because it was so popular at that point. And they changed the face of baseball, of basketball in different ways, but also at the same time, they have their own kind of like side stories beyond them that basketball was bigger than them.
Yeah.
But just them alone were very interesting people that have just stuck around because they love basketball. They love what they do. And like I say, Larry Legend is a very fitting name. I think he's probably more of my favorite of the two just because he's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
he's
our
just
asshole.
Yeah. He's a little bit more fun. But Magic Johnson, I mean, you can't beat the guy's smile. He has that kind of charm. And to watch them both play basketball and the way that they did it and the way that they passed to each other and during the Dream Team days and just any other time, you see that it's just like two guys that are the same guy.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on another episode. We'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.